to another episode of Ask the Betrayed. I'm Sharon,
And I am Ray.
and we are going to talk about the third phase of healing, which is called post-traumatic growth or reconnection. I think that the thing that I want to say right off the bat is that reconnection is with the world around you, with yourself, with the people that you love. It can mean reconnection with the person who has betrayed you, and it might not.
Mhm. And I often will think too in terms of not only with other people's or situations, but other parts of yourself. So the parts of your life that are resurrectable, that you can resurrect the parts that are have some staying power and survive the crisis, as well as parts of you that might be brand new. They've never had a reason or an opportunity to grow in your world before. So it's reconnecting not only to different people and situations, but also different parts of yourself that either were or are or will be.
It's so funny that you say that because I was taking a few notes before we started. And so I was talking about how the recovery in this period shifts. And you have this huge pain in the beginning, and you're flooded by these internal cues of danger. So, in your need to protect and survive, you sort of live in what some people call this functional dissociative haze. And so you're operating in the world, you're taking care of things, you're taking care of the kids, you're doing what you're supposed to, but it is in a very protective type of way. It might be slower, it might be full of confusion and not really knowing what's going to happen next. And this shift in the recovery is to take you from that functional dissociative haze that really causes more relational issues. And I'm going to stop and say, you didn't cause what happened to you. You didn't cause the betrayal that you are living through. And if you stay in protection, then you're not going to get better.
Hmm.
And you're not going to have the relationship that you want. You're not going to have the relationship with yourself or with others around you. So it's this shift from this sort of survival to thrival.
Hmm.
I just made a word up.
Mhm.
The shift is this commitment that you had to never go through pain like that again, but it's shifting from protection to power. And it is a beautiful transformation. Post-traumatic growth is this positive change that happens for people who have experienced trauma. And this section of your healing is the time that you need to and you get to grab that power with both hands to move forward.
Hmm.
The way that you do that, because it sounds like sort of an unknown, like how do I grab power in something that has made me feel so powerless, is really to become aware of who you are. And so this dovetails exactly with what you just said. What is your awareness of who you are? What are the unique parts of you that make you who you are, make you uniquely you? Allow others to see those parts of you, not just that wishing that people could know who you are and see what you feel, really being able to show them who you are so that you can start to seek relational richness within yourself, that internal peace and that external peace.
Mhm. Well, and it's interesting listening to you say that. Another kind of angle to that comes to mind where I know for me, before my traumatic stages of life, maybe that's the way to say it, I lived a lot more of my life externally.
Mm.
I was in many cases more focused upon what others saw in me, what others valued in me. It's one of the reasons I got into the relationship I got into to begin with, is because I was really hyper focused on what I could give to others in my life and less attuned to the kind of love that I wanted and needed for myself. So, in my experience, post traumatic growth was almost more about letting go of what other people saw or believed or sensed or experienced of me and started attaching more of that value to what was going on internally. And that happened in the relationships at close proximity, the people right in my inner circle, and then a little bit further out to the world at large too. So it's a really unique process. I would say, like all of these stages of healing from betrayal and trauma, it's not one size fits all, but there tends to be themes and characteristics that show up consistently.
Mm, I agree. I think about that great AA saying, it's none of your business what other people think about you.
Mm.
And when you first hear it, you think, well, that's not how we're taught to live. That's not what our culture says. That's certainly not what my mama taught me about being a woman or being a little girl and a woman. But the reality of it is that we can't change other people's perceptions of us. We can change our perception of who we are. We
Mhm.
can double down on who we want to be. And it's amazing how accepted we are on the other end when we are uniquely and authentically ourselves.
I'm curious, when you say double down on who we want to be, what do you mean by that?
So I think about that dark night when I realized that James was a sex addict. And I think about realizing that I had started to live a life that was very, very different than who I felt like I was. Living with active addiction had sort of smushed me into the corner. And so as I came out of that realization, I recognized that nobody could live my life for me.
Mm.
Nobody could make me happy. Nobody could do what I needed to do in order to get to the life that I wanted to live. I knew that I could create a life worth living. And if James got healthy enough, he could join me there. So doubling down for me meant going after my values, really, really living my values every day, not living in a fog or just not just surviving, but setting goals and wanting to live life at its fullest. The boundaries that came out of my early recovery helped me do that. I've often talked about this idea that I came up with, and it was this hedge of thorns, and I was inside of it, and there were thorns in and out. So, to protect the life that I wanted to live, I envisioned a hedge of rose bushes that gave me concepts to work on myself to protect the life that I wanted to live. And they became my boundaries. One of my boundaries was deciding that sex addiction was not going to steal one more minute of my life. Didn't mean that I wasn't dealing with it. I didn't deny what was happening. But I decided that sex addiction was something that James needed to handle. And then James and I could collaborate against sex addiction, but that it did not get to make me feel powerless any longer. I had power within myself to create the life that I wanted to live and to hold a space, a safe space for the husband that I loved, if he could join me there. Lots of you might think, well, how did you know? How did you know if he was going to be able to join? How long were you going to do that? The only answer that I had then, and the only answer that I still have now, was that I would know.
Mhm.
that I would know if I was done holding safe space for our marriage. And until I was sure, and I think that over time, as we help other people, we sort of term that surety as, do you feel it for a continuous amount of time, not just a fleeting moment? Boy, I had lots of those fleeting moments, right? But do you feel that you are done for a period of time?
Mhm. Yeah, it's interesting. You and I are coming up with some compare and contrast approaches to all of this today because for me, I think of it in terms of depth.
Mm.
Like there are moments when I was so certain at my core, this is how this is going to play out. This is
Mhm.
where this ends, or this is where this starts. And
Mhm.
I might have doubts or questions, or I might second guess that. But to me, those things never went as deep as that deep, 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 deep awareness that I had to begin with. So that's how I assess for whether it is sustained and sustainable versus a kind of impulsive or panicked or emotionally fueled sort of a response is how deep did it really go compared to the afterthoughts that I had about it.
That's why I love working with. We got the opportunity to double team in group yesterday, and it was so much fun to both be leading our groups. So, what else do you have to say about this season in recovery?
I was thinking about it this morning, and there were two thoughts that came to the surface for me. One is that this is when we see survivors make big moves, big shifts, and by no means believe that the little shifts aren't important. They're significant, they're substantial, they're meaningful, but it's not surprising during this stage to see survivors decide to have children or have no more children, to take a job across the country or switch careers altogether, to take on a hobby that they never thought they would, to really turn something upside down in some ways because I think they don't have anything left to lose. And
Mhm.
that kind of leads me to the second thought that I had this morning is I believe that post-traumatic growth and this reconnection stage is a lot of risk tolerance.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
where we're less afraid of being hurt. We're less avoidant of the discomfort and the pain. And we are more willing to say, I want the good thing that is on the horizon more than I want to protect myself from the fear and the risk of the pain. So taking on challenges that are even beyond what we think we can tackle or we think we can handle or we think we can accomplish. Basically, we stop playing it as safe as we have been. And that risk tolerance is terrifying as heck, might I just say. And it is so rewarding, so thrilling to realize that I just did, or I am doing, or I have done, or I am engaging the thing that I wasn't sure I was ever going to be brave enough to take a risk and try.
Mhm. That's so true. That idea that growth encompasses discomfort, and that through these different stages of recovery, you're learning to tolerate stress
Mhm,
more and more.
mhm,
And so your window of tolerance for stress grows so that you can make the choices that you want. I'm thinking about a partner that we work with that we adore. And she decided that she was going to go climb a big mountain.
mhm,
And it was just great to see her pour her everything into this climb. I can't remember what mountain it was, but she did it with just this beauty and this grace. And she really got to know herself in the journey of preparing for the climb and then joining the group that she eventually climbed the mountain with. I think that that's a really great example of one of the choices we have seen someone in post-traumatic growth make.
yeah. Yeah, and I always feel like I need to qualify that idea about we move forward into big, brave new things courageously, not recklessly. There's a difference. There's a difference to abandoning all care or concern and doing something based on impulse or chasing a high. That's very different than setting our sights on something and tapping into the courage that we have inside and the resourcing that we have externally as well, and being intentional about moving forward with that bravely. But we don't want to be reckless in the process.
That reminds me, I had this list of things that I wanted to do that I created in the beginning of my recovery. And they were all about my own growth and being brave. And 9 out of 10 of them were absolutely stupidly reckless. Luckily, I didn't do them and I redefined my list.
Yeah.
Um, but we do have to think about what is healthy. What steps am I going to take to move forward to make me the person that I am meant to be?
Mhm. And that's the thing. And it's one of the reasons why I really believe this is the third, not the first and not the second stage of trauma resolution, is because it does take time and it does take maturity. It takes some evolution to figure out what intention will serve us and what it will take to pursue and achieve that.
Parachuting out of a plane would have been a very reckless choice for me, although it is a very safe activity for those who do not have the spinal issues that I do. What I was searching for was feeling powerful.
I have an idea about that parachute thing because I'll often say if we can't do the thing that we want to do, what information does that desire hold that we
Mhm.
can then create something else around to meet that drive or that need or that desire? Okay, so I can't let this topic of post-traumatic growth go without revisiting what was really a clearly defined, very mile marker moment in my post-traumatic journey. So I'm going to tell you the story about what I now call the new narrative day on the calendar for me. It's a day that was my former wedding anniversary, so I don't need to say any more than that. You can imagine all of the mixed emotions that accompany a date on the calendar that once represented something so positive, so hopeful, so meaningful, and also a lot of tragedy by the time all was said and done. So I knew at some point along the way that I needed to make that date mean something different than it had ever meant before. I was not going to spend one more time, one more year crying my eyes out on that day on the calendar. So it became the date when I committed to bring new things into my life, new experiences, new expressions of myself, new expressions of self-love. One way or another, I knew that I wanted to make that an annual commemoration for myself. So the first year, I had an entire year to plan what is it that I wanted and intended to do for that first of many celebrations. And I got my first tattoo on that date. Now, for me, the idea of marking something on my body that may or may not turn out the way I envision it and that I would be stuck with it forever was exceptionally terrifying, partly because I'm an artistic person, I'm a visual person. How something looks really does matter to me. And so I was really terrified walking into that. But the inscription I chose for my first tattoo was based on a very long story that I won't tell you all of at this moment. But the line from a play that I love, and it says, I put myself back in the narrative. And I chose that line for that tattoo, for that commemoration, for that date on the calendar, because I realized I had taken myself out of the narrative of my own life. I had stopped speaking up, stopped speaking out, stopped saying the things that mattered most to me. I had shut down, I had started playing small, I had been underactivated in my own life. And I knew that I wanted to make the rest of my life look different than that. So there was a very bold, very broad, very exciting realization and moment that I had a choice about that. And I could step back into the story of my own life. And that's the story of the day that I got my first tattoo. And I love it. And I never look back.
And have you each anniversary of that done something to commemorate it?
I have so many different things. That was the date when I adopted my kittens. So my fur mama gotcha date. That was the date when I wrote my own set of new vows to
Mm.
myself, who I wanted to be in this next stage of my life. I put them in the format of vows because I needed to make them serious. I needed to make them formal. I needed to ritualize the promises I would make to myself because I was most likely to keep them that way.
Mhm.
It was the day that I dedicated to exploring all different new forms of self-care, from stretching to salt sauna to infrared. I did my first cold plunge on that date. Just all kinds of different things over the years, but they've all been surrounded upon that theme of what can I do to bring something new and special into my life.
I love that. And just that encapsulates what happens during this post-traumatic growth and how we continue to grow the rest of our lives coming out of this stage of trauma recovery.
I think that we could probably spend hours talking about all things post-traumatic growth. And I think that we will spend hours in the future talking about all things post-traumatic growth because that's the beauty of this stage is it stretches beyond a point in our history or a measurement of time, years of our lives, and really is the ever after of what happens from this point forward.
I love that. So you'll hear us talk more about post-traumatic growth in coming episodes. If you liked our episode today, please give us a thumbs up, comment. Know that we're going to read everything that you send to us. Give us ideas about what you might want to see on our podcast. Know that even though we'll be reading everything, that we cannot do therapy over email or in the comments. Next week, watch Ask the Unfaithful, and we will be back the week after that. Our website is,
AskTheBetrayed.com.
we look forward to seeing you next time.